Hi, it's Penny here. Welcome to another installment of this series where I am trying a chapter, or trying the first chapter of a whole bunch of fantasy and some sci-fi series that I am interested in reading. Basically, I discovered that there are so many series that I want to read and I'm just never gonna have time to get to all of them. So what I'm doing is reading the first chapter of all of them and putting them in some kind of priority list. I think firstly I started with the ones that I was just interested in them because of the cover. Then I did a bunch that were recommended by booktubers, and in this one we're going to be doing a bunch where there's just a lot of hype around the different book series. So I have these 5 that we're going to go through, and as well I think I have another 2 that I wasn't able to get from the library, but I should still be able to try them digitally. And I'm still really hoping to find some series that I can read via audiobook. So for each of these I will also be trying the audiobook samples, although I have found so far that audiobook samples tend to be a little bit too short to really get the feel of things. Anyway, firstly, I'm just going to read these in like size order of the stack, and then we'll do the digital ones. So that means, firstly, we're going to be starting with The Witcher. That is not the name of this. This is actually called The Last Wish, but the edition we have here is like the TV show tie-in. I have not seen the TV show, and I don't actually have access to Netflix because I'm too cheap to pay for that. Maybe one day, if I love the book. I haven't necessarily heard as many people loving the book. However, I know everyone loves the show, and a lot of people do still like the books, just maybe not as much as the show. It's certainly one that a lot of people have read, and I feel like I'm missing out. Like, these are the ones where there's a lot of hype and I have FOMO. So what do I know about this one? Some kind of guy who's a witcher, which I think is some kind of monster hunter. Honestly, I don't really know that much. I think actually, now that I think about it, this is like a short story collection. So I don't know how try a chapter is going to work with that, but we will try the first chapter and then I'll let you know what I think. Okay, so let's update next to my sad empty bookshelf. I have read the first chapter of The Witcher. It actually turned out to be quite a long chapter, like about 33 pages, I think. And it was broken up into parts, so I thought about just reading like the first couple of parts, but then I thought, am I not giving it a proper go if I do that? So instead I did read that whole first chapter, which was pretty much a full contained story. I don't know that this is a short story anthology so much, like I said. I think it might be more just like disconnected or connected, depending on how you look at it, but like disconnected in time stories of Geralt. I don't know if that's how you say it. He's a monster hunter. So in the first one, he goes to this town where the prince and the princess had a child, and that child turned into a monster who's been terrorizing this castle. And all these people have different things about whether she should be this princess, this child, this monster, whether they should be killed or whether they should be attempted to turn back into a princess. And Geralt has some ideas about what should happen there. I did really find the world very interesting that's been created. I get the feeling it's quite inspired by Polish mythology, which I did just recently read When Among Crows by Veronica Roth, which is also Polish inspired, and I'm interested to get more of that. And as well, I think just the tone was very classic fantasy, but also felt kind of clever. So I'm interested to see like how each of the stories will be told. I like the idea of it being lots of independent stories actually, although I'm expecting there'll be a lot of connections between the stories. Anyway, for this pile, we don't have a priority pile yet, so this will be the first book in the pile. I do think, though, in terms of my bigger priority list, at this point, I think I'm going to put it above The Final Strife. I feel like now that my priority list is getting so long, I am starting to second guess myself and like forget some of the details of the different books. But I just think from The Final Strife and down, like the ones just around the area felt a little bit more YA, whereas this, The Witcher, I feel just felt a little bit more adult and like something I could dig into. So that's where I'm going to put it on the bigger priority. And then I guess next, I'll be picking up the first chapter of Jade City. So this is a trilogy that a lot of people really love, kind of like a mafia style family story, but in this world where jade is used for magic, and so these people are trading in jade. I don't know, I've heard lots of good things about it, so we'll see what I think about the first chapter. Oh, actually, I always forget to say, but audiobook-wise, the audiobook for The Witcher, or for The Last Wish, seemed okay, but also I think I'd probably prefer to read it physically, just because I felt like some of the sentences needed time for me to absorb them, and when I listened to the audiobook, I think I was missing some details, so that would have to be a physical read. Okay, so I have read the first chapter of Jade City, and I have to tell you, even though I'm intrigued about the jade magic, right at the very end of the chapter there was kind of a part of this person experiencing the jade magic, and it did seem like it might be interesting, but the first chapter was really just these young boys trying to pull off this jade theft at this bar that they work at. And like, it was fine, but it just didn't really like pull me in. And maybe it's just like I'm not that interested in little shit criminal boys. Like, I don't know. It's so hard when it's such a hyped book. Like, I've heard so much great stuff about this. I'm sure I will like it. But also, I don't want that hype to influence me too much. I feel like for all these books it probably is, and a lot of these will end up higher than they would have if I'd never heard any hype. But I'm trying not to let the hype affect me too much. And to be honest, the first chapter of this didn't give me too much. So in terms of like comparing it to The Witcher, I think I would probably put it underneath. I will also remember to say I listened to the audiobook. It was probably fine, but I also think this is one I probably would prefer to read physically. Although I could do the audiobook if I really had nothing else to pick up on audiobook. But I do have a few now, so for now I'm going to leave this as a non-audiobook one. I'm going to put it under The Witcher. I am actually surprised that The Witcher is doing so well. Should I be calling it The Last Wish? I don't know. Anyway, if I'm looking at my bigger priority list, I'm having an argument with myself. Part of me wants to put it under The Book That Wouldn't Burn by Mark Lawrence, because like it doesn't have that magical library thing, but I'd put it above the Michael Sullivan series, because I still think the writing was better than that. But now I'm questioning myself, because then I try and look at it compared to A Master of Gin, which I put lower, and I'm thinking, did Master of Gin actually give me more to make me interested in it? So then should I move Jade City down? Or is it that I should actually move A Master of Gin up? Am I allowed to do that? You know what? Maybe I'll do that. Yeah, that makes me feel much better about the order, actually. Okay, so next, I'm going to be reading Senlin Ascends. One thing I will say that I found interesting is in my copy of Jade City that I got from the library, at the back there was a section where you can see the pages are a little bit darker, and it turns out it's the extras section, and in there is a sample of the first chapter of Senlin Ascends. So this book is suggesting that I should try this book next, which I was gonna do anyway. That seems like a weird coincidence. Anyway, this is about a man who goes with his wife. Now, I have heard that his wife is much younger than him, and some people didn't appreciate that, and I don't tend to enjoy age gap romances, so we'll see how I feel about that. So this man and his wife go to the Tower of Babel, which is meant to be like this amazing place to go. However, they get separated, and then he has to go looking for her, something like that. And I think every level of the tower is completely different or something, which always makes me think of actually Snowpiercer, which I love, even though it's terrible in some ways. Anyway, I'll read the first chapter and tell you what I think. Hello, so let's pretend that it hasn't been 3 months or something like that since I last updated this video. I just got way too busy with house moving stuff, but regardless, I have just read the first chapter of Senlin Ascends, and to be honest, firstly, I hated the audiobook. Like, I think we have the UK version, so I don't know if there's a US version that might be better, but there's just this particular UK voice that some narrators have. I don't like it. I don't know why, but I just immediately, as soon as I started it, I thought, nope, I won't be listening to this audiobook. So then I was reading it physically, and I do really like some of the descriptions and the way it's kind of building this wonder around the Tower of Babel, like making it seem so wondrous and almost whimsical, but not really. I think wondrous is the correct word. And I also like how that contrasts with this main character, Senlin, because I thought he might be kind of an adventurer, but he's more of like a studious professor guy, and he's somewhat nervous about everything. He gets overwhelmed quite easily, and you can see he likes to follow the rules. And so it's kind of quite different from how the Tower of Babel is being painted as this very crazy, over-the-top place with lots going on. So I do like that. What I don't like, and I knew I wasn't going to like this, is that Senlin has this young wife, and it says that he's in his mid-30s and she is a dozen years younger than him, which would make her in her early 20s. I hate age gap stuff like that, so I think that's gross. Furthermore, it says that he is the only teacher, the headmaster and the only teacher in the small town that they come from, which almost definitely means that he was her teacher. Double gross. And she's like almost, not quite, but a little bit manic pixie dream girl, and that she's much more exuberant and enthusiastic about everything that's going on and like much more adventurous. So I kind of hate everything about what's being done with that. And then as well, right at the end of the chapter, she does disappear, which is what I knew would be happening in this book. I've forgotten whether I said that to you, but anyway, I know now he's going to be off like trying to find her. But just the fact that he lost her in the beginning was very frustrating, because he'd already explained the rules that were you shouldn't ever let your companions go out of your sight. So why did he do that? Anyway, it has been a long time since I read the other books in this video, and what I find is Jade City, barely any memory of it, which part of me was feeling bad that would affect the ordering, but actually that's kind of a sign, isn't it? So I think actually I'm going to put Senlin at Sen's above Jade City, but not above The Witcher. And then in the bigger priority, I think I'm just going to put it just above Jade City, because I still think I'm more interested in A Master of Jinn. I think mainly just because A Master of Jinn did less to annoy me, but both the worlds seem quite interesting. Anyway, next I'm going to be picking up the first chapter of The Justice of Kings by Richard Swan. So this, I believe, is from the perspective of this young woman who is the apprentice to this very powerful justice, and they're trying to bring this kingdom or town or something kind of under control. And I believe it's going to ask a lot of questions about what is the right thing to do, and whether sometimes it's right to do the wrong thing. I don't really know, but I've heard a lot of great things about it, so let's try the first chapter. Hello! So, I just read the first chapter of The Justice of Kings, and I quite liked it. So basically, as I said, it is this apprentice to this justice that we're following the perspective of. They've just turned up into this town which has been like absorbed by the bigger empire, and the bigger empire enforces that people need to believe this particular religion or need to follow this particular religion, even though it seems like this particular religion is a bit of a hokey one that almost like absorbs any other religion that they come across. But then this town that they've just showed up to follows this older religion, and it's quite clear that the justice doesn't really believe in the empire's religion, but he's going to enforce it anyway. So I guess that's kind of going to be the story, is that they're going out and enforcing this justice, but like, is it justice? And clearly they don't really believe in it, so are they going to continue to enforce it? When enforcing it could potentially mean like burning everybody in the village. So that's extreme. Anyway, I quite liked it. I did listen to a little bit of the audiobook, and I think it was okay, but what I'm kind of getting now after trying the first chapter of a lot of different audiobooks is I don't think idea books are that good on audiobook. Like, I think stories with a lot of plot and action are really great for audiobook, but ones with a lot of ideas, it's just, you never get that chance to like pause and absorb that you do when you're physically reading. You can stop and you can think about things, but the audiobook just continues on. So even though I didn't mind the audiobook, I think I would probably prefer to read this one physically. Oh, and I think as well, even though the audiobook narrator was good, I liked the tone that I gave the narration in my head better. Like, I liked the writing tone, but not necessarily the narration tone. So I'm going to put this right up the top of the books that I've been reading for this video, and then in my bigger priority, I think I'm actually still going to put it pretty high. I'm going to put it right after The Art of Prophecy, which makes it just above the first binding. What's interesting in this project now is that I have actually read the first binding now, but I don't want to take it off the priority list because I would like to just keep building this priority list, and then at some point when I've read all these books, come back and see, like, was this first impression priority the same as my final rating priority? I think it would be interesting to have a look at that, but at the moment I'm really just reading the audiobook ones that I picked out, and I picked out the first binding for the audiobook. But like, the thing is, even though the first binding is very high on the priority list, for reasons, I only gave it 1 star, so that's gonna really ruin my thinking about this ordering going forward, I think, a little bit. But I'm gonna try and keep my first impressions of first binding in mind and use that for the priority rather than my final experience. Anyway, next I'm going to pick up Malice by Gwynne. I don't really know anything about this, even though I honestly think I have heard multiple people talk about it and they're always saying it's really great. So why have I not absorbed what it's about? That's possibly a concern, but still I have heard a lot of hype. And Becca in the Books just announced that she's going to be reading that next for her catch-up book club. So it would be good if I thought I was going to really like this. So let's see. Okay, so I've read the prologue, a little weird extract, and then also the first chapter of Malice. I will say I did not listen to the audiobook because it appears that Audible for New Zealand or Audible for Australia, maybe, because New Zealand doesn't get its own one. We just have to use Australia's one. And I assume what's available for me in New Zealand is the same as Australia. But for Malice by Gwynne, the only one available is a French version. So that's not what I wanted. I actually started listening to the sample and straight away was like, no. I feel like I hardly ever used to come across audiobooks that were available in America or other places but weren't available locally. And then lately I've come across a heap of them and I'm quite annoyed about it. I don't know why. So anyway, I guess I won't be reading that via audiobook. And in the beginning, I don't think it would have fitted audiobook well anyway, because what I liked about it is there was a heap of lore, like so much that I wasn't really taking it in, but I felt like there was a deep world being introduced. So the prologue is all about this man who wants to become all-powerful, and he's willing to make a sacrifice that seems to be a part of this bigger war between the gods. So the war between the gods, and it seems like it's a bit of a Norse mythology inspired fantasy world. That's something I'm really interested in, and I feel like there's enough in the world that that's going to be a big part of it. It was definitely a big part of the prologue, and then the extract was all about that war between the gods and how they've now essentially been abandoned by their god, or at least that's what they believe. The first chapter though, I liked less. The first chapter was following this young boy who's just mucking around at this like marriage announcement between the prince or something. And it was well written and the characters felt real and the world felt real, but it was also quite a long chapter and not very much happened other than just kind of like introducing this young character. And I can also see though that the next chapter is a different character, and I kind of remember hearing that this series has a lot of different characters. So then I don't even know, was this first chapter like representative of the series? I would kind of prefer it to be more like the prologue. But this war between the gods does make me interested, and even though the first chapter was long and it was a little bit of a slog to get through, I still think it's well written and something I could enjoy. So I think for this video, I'm going to put it above Senlin Ascends because I'm still a little bit bitter about that age gap romance in Senlin Ascends, and just reading Malice, I felt that like fantasy feeling. Like lately I've been reading a lot of fantasy books that I have felt are a bit generic and I haven't been enjoying them. But this, even though in some ways I guess you could say it's generic, it's like that kind of fantasy that I like, and it's nice to be reading that kind of fantasy again. So I'm going to put it above Senlin Ascends, but not above The Witcher book, because like it didn't feel as clever in the sample that I read as The Witcher did. So then in the bigger priority, I think I'm going to put it under The Final Strife. Again, we're getting into trouble. I'm going to put it above One Dark Window, and I'm pretty sure that based on my initial impression, that's what I would have thought, but I'm also in the process of reading One Dark Window at the moment, and once again, not loving it as much as I might have hoped based on the first chapter. So trying to put that aside and just remember my impressions. I still think that I was a little bit worried when I read One Dark Window, the first chapter, that it would be a little bit too much romantasy for me and that the main character wouldn't be someone I would connect with. Anyway, I'm going to put it in that gap because One Final Strife, I definitely think the ideas seemed a lot stronger, or at least they were introduced in a more, like in a way that seemed like they were more unique. So that's where I'm going to put it. Next up, I'm going to pick up Gunslinger by Stephen King. So this is the first book in the Dark Tower series. I know that's a really well-loved series, but honestly, somehow, I don't actually know anything about it. But I have read some Stephen King stuff that I have really enjoyed, so I want to give it a go. So let's go. Okay, so I have read the first chapter of Gunslinger by Stephen King, and firstly, I need to say, the sample on Kindle, the first chapter didn't start until 70% of the way through the sample because there was this massive like introduction and forward. The intro I think was by Stephen King. I didn't read the forward because by then I was just like, how far through am I having to scroll before I actually get to the start of the book? Like, I was actually worried that I was going to get to the end of the sample and still not even have read the book, or that the sample would end before the end of chapter 1 because it was close. Anyway, that first chapter didn't really give me anything that I felt excited about. We're mainly following this guy as he travels across the desert in pursuit of this man in black. And there seems like there's some strange, maybe magically things going on. There's a lot of description. And actually, so firstly I listened to the audiobook and I was thinking, no, this is one of these audiobooks where because there's so much description, it's just too much for my brain to take in and I'd be better to read it physically. But actually when I read it physically, I thought, maybe I was actually taking in the description better in the audiobook. So now I'm conflicted about whether this one would be good to try on audiobook or not. But it is a long series, which would be good for audiobook because in general I have a lot more like physical books on my queue and a lot less audiobooks. So maybe I could try it on audiobook, but also, so in terms of priority, for the ones I'm reading in this video, bottom of the list, I just like, it's fine. But it didn't draw me in at all. It didn't give me anything in that first chapter really to be excited about. In the bigger priority, I think I would still put it above The Long Way to a Small Angry Planet because I think it gave me more than that one did. That one didn't give me anything to be excited about, even though I know a lot of you love it, but not for me. And I am putting it under The Ninth Reign, which I didn't really like either, but I think it gave me more interesting concepts. So that's where we're going to put that one. Next, I'm going to be reading Leviathan Wakes, which is a sci-fi series that a lot of people rave about. I don't know much about it. I think I always hear some kind of like detectives in space, but also other people tell me there's more to it than that. So I'll read the first chapter and we'll see what we think. Hello, so this is a late night update, but I just read the first chapter of Leviathan Wakes. So this one, like all of the books in this video, is super hyped, but I didn't really like it. So actually, the prologue, I quite like the prologue. It's about this girl and the spaceship that she's on gets like attacked by someone. She doesn't really know who, and she ends up kind of forgotten in a locker and kind of goes through like what she's suffering through before she's finally willing to like go out and face these people that have taken over the spaceship. And I really like the way that was written. I will say it didn't translate well to audiobook because it was a lot of really short sentences, but because that prologue was so different from the rest of the book, I feel like the audiobook might be better for the rest of it. But of course the sample was too short to get to the first chapter. It was only the prologue, so I don't know. But I also didn't really like the narrator's voice, but in a way that's completely picky and unfair. So I probably wouldn't listen to the audiobook for this. But also, the first chapter, to me, I'm going to put this in the big priority order near A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, because the way that the crew on this other spaceship that's going to come across the first one and their emergency beacon. So the way the crew is being described to me felt very similar in that it's kind of meant to be quirky, and you've got this whole cast of characters being described, and you're obviously meant to like feel some kind of attachment, or like, I don't know, there's like a feeling of camaraderie, but I'm not feeling it. Like, I can see that that's how it's being written, but I'm not feeling it. And like, there's kind of a sense of humor to it that I just don't think is my sense of humor. And I can see, like, this is super hyped, I can see that maybe it improves, or maybe it's just not my sense of humor. I'm not sure. I know that some people are definitely going to come and say, oh no, it's really good, you should read it, but that first chapter just didn't really do it for me. I didn't like the main character, and I feel like he's being written to be very likable, but I just didn't like him. So in terms of the overall priority, I think I'm actually putting it right at the end. It was the one that made me the least interested. If I'd only read that first prologue, it might have been different, but I also read the first chapter. So then, in terms of the big priority, as I said, I'm going to put it just above A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, because of the prologue, mostly. So then I only have one more book that I'm going to read for this video, and it is The Will of the Many by James Islington. So this one is also super hyped recently, and I'm hoping to love it. Everything I've heard about it makes me think that I will. Also, like, the last couple I put right at the end of priority, and I'd like to have another book that I'm excited about reading rather than another one that's not living up to the hype, you know? Oh, actually, and the only thing I know about The Will of the Many is that the magic system is somehow based around will, and I guess people can combine their wills. Maybe I'm making that bit up. Maybe I should just read the first chapter. Okay, so I finished the first chapter of The Will of the Many, and I quite liked it. I will say, just the general setup does remind me of Warbreaker by Brandon Sanderson, purely because the very beginning starts out with basically a list of numbers, like saying if you have this many people ceding their will to you, then you're this level. If you have this many people, you're this level, and it kind of just goes through the different levels. And I'm pretty sure Warbreaker also starts out with a very similar table, although Warbreaker is very decimal based. And I didn't actually pay enough attention to the numbers in Will of the Many, but I felt like it was more like base 2 or base 8 or something. Anyway, that's maths. It's not actually the point of the book at all. But so in Warbreaker, the idea is that everyone is born with a breath, and then you can give it to other people, and then the more breaths that people collect, the more powerful they are. It seems like, although you don't get that much of it in the first chapter, that The Will of the Many is all based around hierarchies, and the idea is that you can cede your will to someone else, and then the number of people they have ceding will to them. So it's like more of a long-term connection, I think. And also, of course, if people cede their will to you and then you cede your will to someone else, then that person gets even more power. I think there really wasn't in the first chapter much explanation of how this will works. It was really only used for like administrative, like unlocking doors type things. I think that's what was happening there. So mostly though, the setup of the first chapter is we're introduced to this young man who's working in a prison, but it seems like he's working in this prison kind of in hiding, trying not to draw any attention to himself, because he has really been trained as like some kind of leader or scholarship type position, and now he's in hiding. Something's happened. We don't really know what. But also this prison he's working in is really horrible because all the prisoners are attached to these sappers, and they drain the will from these people, and it seems like these people are just having an awful time the whole time. They're in kind of like a semi-comatose state. And then this guy has showed up to like wake up and interview one of these prisoners, but it seems like there's some dodgy dealings going on there, and the main character is really just afraid that whatever's happening is going to draw attention to him. But it also seems like a lot of people who work in this prison, if they even touch these sappers, will like lose their mental ability. But maybe our main character is immune to these sappers. Maybe. There's a lot of questions raised in the first chapter, and I like the way that it did it. Like, quite a lot of world building mixed with a lot of questions, but also like still having something interesting without doing too much info dumping. I thought the first chapter was really well done. I don't know that this goes quite to the top of the priority, but definitely for the books that I read in this video, it does go to the top of the priority. So that's nice after the last two went down the bottom. So I think for the bigger priority, I'll probably put The Will of the Many just above The Justice of Kings, because I read that in this video. But underneath, what's it called? The Art of Prophecy. So that does put The Will of the Many pretty high. I will say, like, given that these are all books that are super hyped, I don't think I put them that high. I guess generally pretty high, but not like as high as you might think. Like, you might have thought I put all of these right at the top of the priority, but I'm definitely still the most excited about reading The Outside by Ada Hoffman. I really hope it won't let me down when I get to it. Anyway, I hope all of these won't let me down when I get to them, but for some super hyped books, some of these I'm definitely a lot less excited about reading now that I've read the first chapter. You can't always trust the hype, I guess, is the conclusion. But at this point, I also don't know, can I trust my first chapter impressions? I don't know. I am currently reading some of these top ones, and next year I think I'll really make a focus in reading some of the ones that I want to read physically, rather than, like, so far I've mainly been reading the audiobook ones because I've got way too many other books to read physically. Anyway, let me know if you have read any of the series that I tried a chapter of in this video, because I would really love to know whether you think my first impressions are the correct impressions, or whether maybe the first chapters are a bit misleading as to what the rest of the books are like. As well, I know that it's taken me a while to get this video up. My next try a chapter video, I will try to get out in like another month, and then keep doing these one a month until I've got through all the books that I wanted to try. So that I really can then know what my series priorities are. And I think now that I've moved house and I've got somewhat settled in, it should be a lot easier to keep trying these chapters. I think next I'm going to try and pick up books or series by either my favorite authors or potential favorite authors. I've got high hopes that a lot of those will end up high priority. So do subscribe if you'd like to see more of my bookish videos or more of these try a chapter videos. Otherwise, thank you so much for watching. I hope that you are doing well, and I will see you next time.